There is a moment, every single day, that most people rush right past. The moment right before you eat. You sit down, maybe alone, maybe the house is quiet, quieter than it used to be, and without even noticing, you pick up the fork and you begin. But what if I told you that this exact moment, the one you skip without thinking, is the moment Buddhist monks have treated as sacred for over 2,000 years? Not the eating itself, the moment just before it. If you are past 60, you already know something that younger people don't yet understand. You know that meals used to mean something different. There was noise around the table once, children arguing, a spouse asking about your day. Now, for many of you, the table is quieter. Maybe you eat alone more often than you'd like to admit. Maybe the silence at mealtime has become one of the loudest sounds in your life. This is not weakness. This is not something to be ashamed of. This is one of the oldest human experiences there is, and Buddhist monks, many of whom live in silence by choice, have spent centuries learning how to sit with exactly this kind of stillness. Not fighting it, not filling it with noise, learning from it. So today, I want to show you something simple, a habit so small it takes less than 60 seconds. But if you let it, it can quietly change your relationship with solitude, with food, and with the years ahead. Let's start with the old wisdom, and then I'll show you exactly what to do. In monasteries across Southeast Asia, before monks touch their food, they pause. This pause has a name in the old Pali language. It comes from a practice tied to sati, mindfulness, or remembering to pay attention. Sati simply means, come back to this moment, not the moment that already passed, not the moment that hasn't arrived, this one, right here, right now. Before a monk eats, he often reflects, silently, briefly, on where the food came from, the sun that grew it, the hands that harvested it, the people, sometimes strangers, who prepared it. He does this not out of obligation, but because it changes what eating means. It stops being just fuel. It becomes a small meeting point between himself and the whole world that made this meal possible. Now you might be thinking, that's a beautiful idea for a monk in a temple. But what does that have to do with me eating soup alone in my kitchen on a Tuesday? Here is the answer. And I want you to really sit with this one. Loneliness at mealtime often comes from a single quiet belief. I am eating this meal by myself, therefore I am alone. But the monk's pause teaches something different. It teaches that even in silence, even without another person across the table, you are still connected to the earth that grew your food, to the people who brought it to you, to every person, living or gone, whoever cared enough to teach you how to cook, how to grow something, how to sit and eat with gratitude. The table can be quiet, but it is never truly empty. This is not a trick to make loneliness disappear. Buddhist teaching never promises to erase pain with a clever thought. What it offers is something more honest. A way to be with the feeling, instead of running from it or being crushed by it. There is a teaching in Buddhism called anicca, impermanence. Everything changes. The noisy house full of children becomes the quiet house of later years. This is not a punishment. It is simply the nature of life, the same as seasons changing, the same as morning turning to night. Fighting this truth causes suffering. Accepting it, gently, opens a door to peace. And here is something important. Accepting impermanence does not mean giving up on joy. It means understanding that this moment, even a quiet meal alone, deserves your full attention, precisely because it will not last forever, and neither will you. That is not a frightening thought. It is, strangely, a very tender one. So let's talk about the habit itself. What exactly do monks do, and how can you bring a version of it into your own kitchen, starting today? It is simple, almost embarrassingly simple, but do not mistake simplicity for lack of power. Before you eat, any meal, any day, you pause for 3 breaths. That's it. 3 breaths before the fork touches the plate. Let me walk you through exactly how to do this, slowly, the way you would actually do it at your own table. First, sit down with your meal in front of you, as you normally would. Do not pick up your fork yet. Just look at what's there. Really look. The colors, the steam rising if it's warm, the way the light falls on the plate. Now take your first breath. Breathe in slowly through your nose, and as you do, silently acknowledge one simple thought. This food came from somewhere. Someone or something gave its life or its labor so I could eat today. You don't need fancy words. Even just, thank you to the earth, is enough. Breathe out slowly. Take your second breath. As you breathe in, bring to mind one person, living or gone, who taught you something about food, about cooking, about family meals. A mother who taught you to season soup. A grandmother who insisted everyone wash their hands first. A spouse who always sat across from you. Let them be present with you, just for this breath, even if they are not present in body. Breathe out. Take your third breath. This time, as you breathe in, bring your attention fully into your body, the chair beneath you, your feet on the floor, the weight of your own hands resting near the plate. This is where you remind yourself, I am here, alive, breathing. This moment is mine. Breathe out slowly. Then, and only then, you begin to eat. That's the entire habit. 3 breaths, perhaps 45 seconds, maybe a minute if you go slowly, which I encourage you to do. I want to be honest with you about something. The first few times you try this, it might feel strange. You might feel a lump in your throat when you think of someone who taught you to cook, someone who is no longer at your table. That's all right. That is not the exercise failing. That is the exercise working. Buddhist practice was never about avoiding feeling. It was about making room for it, safely, gently, on your own terms, for just a few breaths at a time. Monks who live in monasteries are not without grief. Many of them left families behind. Many have lost people they loved. The pause before eating is not a magic spell that removes sadness. It is a container, a small, safe space, where sadness, gratitude, memory, and peace are all allowed to exist together for just a moment before life continues. And that is exactly what a meal alone can become for you, too. Not empty. Not just a task to get through. A small, quiet appointment with your own life. Let me tell you something else about this practice, something that surprised even the monks who study it deeply. The pause before eating was never meant only for solitude. It was designed just as much for moments when the table is full, when children are shouting, when grandchildren are visiting, when the noise of a family gathering fills every corner of the room. In those moments, too, the mind rushes. We eat quickly. We talk over the food without truly noticing it. The 3 breaths work there as well, a way of stepping, just briefly, out of the rush of life, no matter how loud or how quiet that life happens to be. I mention this because I don't want you to think this habit is only a remedy for loneliness. It is bigger than that. It is a way of meeting any meal, noisy or silent, shared or solitary, with your full presence, instead of your mind wandering off to yesterday's worries or tomorrow's doctor's appointment. But I understand why, for many of you watching this, the silence is the part that hurts the most. So let's stay with that a little longer, because it deserves real attention, not just a quick habit and a rushed goodbye. Here is something Buddhist teachers often say, and it might sound strange the first time you hear it. Loneliness and solitude are not the same thing. Loneliness is a wound. It is the ache of feeling cut off, forgotten, unseen. Solitude, on the other hand, can be a doorway. It is simply the state of being physically alone, nothing more, nothing less. The difference is not in the empty chair across from you. The difference is entirely in how your mind relates to that empty chair. This is not meant to dismiss real grief. If you have lost a spouse, if your children live far away and call less than you'd like, if your friends have grown fewer with each passing year, that pain is real, and no breathing exercise erases it. I would never tell you otherwise, and neither would any honest monk. But here is what the practice offers, a way to slowly, gently, meal by meal, retrain your mind to notice that solitude is not automatically loneliness. That an empty chair can also simply be an empty chair, not a symbol of abandonment, but just a chair, in a room, in a life that still has meaning in this very moment. This retraining does not happen in one sitting. It happens the way water shapes stone, slowly, through repetition, through small moments returned to again and again. This is why the habit is tied to something you already do every single day, eating. You don't need to remember a new appointment. You don't need special equipment or a quiet retreat in the mountains. You already sit down to eat, most likely 2 or 3 times a day. Each of those moments becomes an opportunity, waiting quietly for you to notice it. Now, let's talk about the body for a moment, because this matters too. Many of you have told yourselves, in one way or another, some version of this thought, my body isn't what it used to be, so what's the point of slowing down and paying attention to it? I want to gently push back on that thought, because it has the truth backwards. It is precisely because the body changes with age that this attention matters more, not less. When you were younger, you could eat carelessly, standing at the counter, rushing to the next task, and your body absorbed the carelessness without much complaint. That grace period fades with time. Digestion slows. Appetite changes. Sometimes joy in food fades along with appetite, especially when meals have become solitary, mechanical, something to get through rather than something to receive. The 3 breaths do something quietly physical too, beyond the emotional and spiritual layer. When you pause and breathe slowly before eating, you shift your body out of a stressed state and into a calmer one. Digestion works better when the body isn't tense. Food tastes different, richer, more present, when you're not eating while your mind races elsewhere. This isn't mysticism. It's simply what happens when a nervous system is given a moment to settle before work begins. So this small ritual is not only about peace of mind, it is a form of care for the very body that has carried you this far, through 60, 70, 80 years of life. A body that deserves a slower, kinder relationship with food in these years, not because it has failed you, but because it has done so much, for so long, and asks only for a little patience in return. Let's return to the teaching of impermanence for a moment, because I think it holds something important here too. Buddhist monks do not view the changing body as a tragedy. They view it as simply the truth of being alive. Skin changes, strength changes, the pace of the body changes. None of this is a personal failure. It is the shared inheritance of every living thing that has ever existed, every tree, every animal, every human being across all of history. You are not falling behind some invisible race. You are simply moving through the very same river that every person who came before you also moved through. This does not mean pretending you enjoy every part of aging. It means holding it honestly, without excessive fear, and without pretending it isn't happening either. The 3 breaths before a meal are, in their own quiet way, a small daily practice of exactly this kind of honesty. You sit with your body as it is today, not as it was 30 years ago, not as you wish it still were, as it is, right now, at this table, in this moment. I want to address something else too, because I think some of you watching are skeptical, and that's all right. Buddhist wisdom was never meant to be swallowed blindly. In fact, the historical Buddha himself is often quoted as encouraging people not to believe something simply because it was told to them, but to test it against their own experience. So test this, not with blind faith, with your own kitchen table. Try the 3 breaths tomorrow, before your first meal. Notice, honestly, whether anything shifts, even slightly. Maybe you'll notice the food tastes a little more vivid. Maybe you'll notice your shoulders drop half an inch from where they usually sit, tense, without you even realizing it. Maybe nothing dramatic will happen the first time, and that's fine too. This is not a performance with an immediate reward. It is a seed, planted quietly, meal after meal, day after day. Some of you may want to add something small to the ritual, and that's welcome. Some people, before their 3 breaths, light a small candle at the table, even when eating alone. Others keep a single photograph nearby, a spouse, a parent, an old friend, not out of sadness, but as a quiet way of saying, you are still part of my table, even now. None of this is required. The 3 breaths alone are enough. But if these small additions bring you comfort, Buddhist tradition has never discouraged personal ritual, only excessive attachment to needing it to be a certain way. What matters most is not the exact form. What matters is the intention behind it, choosing, deliberately, to meet this meal, and by extension, this stage of your life, with attention instead of avoidance. Now I want to speak about something a little larger, because a habit like this one, small as it seems, often opens a door to a bigger question, and if you've stayed with me this far, I suspect that question has already been quietly forming in your mind. The question is this: what is all this attention actually for? Why does it matter whether I breathe 3 times before a bowl of soup? What difference does it really make in the bigger picture of a life that is, undeniably, closer to its end than its beginning? I won't pretend this is a small question. It's one of the biggest ones there is. And Buddhist teaching doesn't dodge it, it walks straight toward it, the way it walks toward every difficult truth. Here is what that teaching offers, as gently as I can put it. Attention to small things is not a distraction from the big questions of life and death. It is the actual practice of meeting them. You cannot hold the enormous idea of mortality in your hands directly. It's too big, too abstract, and if you look at it head-on for too long, it can overwhelm rather than teach. But you can hold one breath. You can hold one meal. You can hold one moment of genuine gratitude at a quiet table. And here is the secret the monks have always known. Those small moments, gathered together, one after another, day after day, are not separate from the big question of a life well lived. They are the answer, quietly assembling itself, meal by meal, breath by breath. This is why the habit is not really about food at all, not in the end. Food is simply the doorway, because it's a doorway you walk through every single day, without fail, for the rest of your life. What you are actually practicing, each time you pause for 3 breaths, is presence. The ability to be fully here, in whatever time remains, instead of half here, worrying about the past, or fearing the future. For those of you carrying the quiet weight of how much time do I have left, and I suspect some of you are, I want to offer this thought gently, without false comfort, because false comfort helps no one. None of us know how much time remains. Not you, not me, not anyone. This has always been true, at every age, though it becomes harder to ignore as the years pass. Buddhist teaching does not try to solve this uncertainty. It does not pretend to know what you don't know. Instead, it offers a different question, one that actually can be answered. Not how much time is left, but how present am I right now in the time I have this very moment. The 3 breaths before a meal are a daily rehearsal of exactly this question. Not a rehearsal for death, but a rehearsal for life, for actually being inside the years you still have, instead of merely waiting them out. I think, too, about the idea of legacy, because I know it weighs on many of you. What will be remembered? What will remain once you're gone? Here is something worth sitting with. Legacy is often imagined as something large, an achievement, a fortune, a famous name. But in the quiet philosophy behind this small mealtime habit, legacy looks different. It looks like the grandmother who taught you to season soup, present in your mind for one breath, decades after she's gone. It looks like a way of sitting with food, with gratitude, with attention, that you might one day pass to a grandchild, without ever needing to explain the philosophy behind it, simply by them watching you pause, breathe, and begin. Legacy, in this light, is not a monument. It is a way of being that quietly continues through the people who watched you live it. I want to bring this back down to the table now, because I don't want to leave you only with big ideas and no ground beneath your feet. Tonight or tomorrow morning, whenever your next meal comes, I want you to try this. Not perfectly, not with pressure to feel something profound immediately, just simply, honestly, try it. Sit down, look at your food before touching it. Take a breath, and think of where this food came from, the earth, the hands, the effort behind it. Take a second breath, and bring to mind someone who taught you something about food, or about care, or about family. Someone present in your memory, even if not present at your table. Take a third breath, and simply notice that you are here. Breathing. Sitting. Alive, in this exact moment, with this exact meal in front of you. Then eat, slowly, if you can manage it. Notice the taste a little more than usual. Notice the quiet, and let it be quiet, without rushing to fill it with the television or a phone. Just for this one meal, let the silence be a companion instead of an enemy. You may find, the first time, that very little happens. That's all right. This isn't about a single dramatic transformation. It's about a small, repeated act of care, for your body, for your memories, for the people who came before you, and for the time you still have ahead. Do this again tomorrow, and the day after that. Let it become as automatic as picking up your fork. Over weeks, over months, you may find that meals, even solitary ones, begin to feel less like empty obligations and more like small, sacred appointments with your own life. The Buddhist monks who practiced this pause did not invent a solution to loneliness, or to aging, or to the fear of what comes next. They simply found a way to meet these truths honestly, gently, without pretending they don't exist, and without being crushed by them either. 3 breaths at a time. You have lived long enough to know that big changes rarely come from big gestures. They come, quietly, from small things repeated with care over years. This is one of those small things. It costs nothing. It takes less than a minute, and it asks only that you be willing to pause, just briefly, before you begin. So the next time you sit down to eat, whether the table is loud with family, or quiet with just you and your own thoughts. Remember this. Before the fork touches the plate, there is a moment waiting for you. A moment monks have honored for over 2,000 years. A moment that asks for nothing more than 3 slow breaths and your honest attention. That moment is yours, every single day for as many days as you have left. And each time you meet it fully, you are not just eating a meal. You are practicing quietly and faithfully the art of being truly present for your own life. That is what the monks do before every meal. And that is why, after 60, it can change everything.